Hello, Professor. This is my CSC 110 final project video. um, the way I've sort of broken this down is I'll talk about just sort of my method, the structure of the code itself, and I'll actually run the demonstration right now just because it does take so long, just so you can see that it is running. And then I'll just sort of try to keep it out of the way as much as possible while I'm doing this, although it is kind of big. Okay. YouTube link, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, so the method I was trying to employ, I kind of thought of it as a typewriter, which doesn't seem particularly obvious from this here. But the way I was thinking about it when I was coming up with this was that I wanted it to go over to this first quadrant and then just sort of reset the carriage like a typewriter down to the next line. And then I could just do the same thing down to the next line. And then I guess you could think of these quadrants like sheets of paper then if you wanted to stick to the whole typewriter thing. But what I was trying to do is just break down this whole thing into the smallest pieces possible and build those pieces on top of other pieces on top of other pieces over and over again until I finally got this, and then I could turn it into the final product. And so I started off with a square and then doing triangles, and then I combined those two in essence to make these bisected squares here, from top right, bottom left, and from top left to bottom right. And then just sort of adjusted the fill order to make it so that I could make these quadrants turn out correctly. And then I could just sort of use that same basic methodology to turn these one quadrant into several more instances of itself, and then take that piece and then just sort of repeat it several times and then reset again, bring the carriage, if you will, down over here. Same methodology, bring it down, same thing over here. Let's see how far we've gotten. Yep, plugging along. And so, let's see here. So, like I said, I wanted to start off with a square and triangles. And so here we have the little setup section. I got turtle and math in here. The only thing I used math for was the square root function here, but I didn't even actually need it, but I figured it's already in there, might as well keep it. And so made the window, made the turtle. I have speed set to 0. It takes a long time though. Oh, and this is the final product. I've just sort of ran it and then screen clipped it for you here so that you can see it. So I started off with the square and then moved on to a triangle. And I wanted to designate it so that there would be one that bisected from right to left, and then another that would bisect from left to right. And then I sort of combined them to make that cut square bisected right to left and left to right. And then I just used those over and over and over again. There we go. Excuse me. Just use those over and over again and inverting the colors to finally make it through all of this. So I started off with the square and the triangles, made the bisected squares, and then I would create a row and then use that one row to create a quadrant, a full instance of the pattern, and then that full instance gets turned into a row, and then that row gets turned into this 3x3 square, and then that gets turned into a row of 3x3 squares, which then gets turned into this entire final product. Excuse me. And so basically I just wanted to, like I said, start with a quadrant And so the first step to that was making the square, triangle, bisected square, and then color. And then for the full pattern, I just had to go ahead and invert um, color and fill color when I was going through here. But before I get to that, I suppose I should probably talk to you about the movement functions, just because at times it was kind of irritating making sure that the turtle was where you wanted to be and doing what you wanted him to do. There were times where I needed him to move forward and back one just because of the way I structured things up in here. It sort of bled over into the other parts, and I had to do small adjustments. And then, like I said, I was trying to keep with that typewriter thing. And then we got carriage, quadrant carriage, half carriage, full carriage, row carriage, pattern row carriage, and final carriage. So the way I've kind of organized the code here, these little headers here, is I have the basic shapes here, and then I move on more advanced shapes, movement functions, and then here we have full sections. And so TLQ is for top left quadrant. And then I have one for top right, bottom left, and bottom right, and then one full and so on. But the way I was doing it is I would just sort of have it set so it would draw just one square, and then just because of the way I wrote that, I had to have him reposition himself to be properly set up for the next one. And then move on to the next, and then I would just change the ordering of these from right to left and color and fill color to make sure that they match the appropriate spots on the pattern here. And then go from one quadrant to the next, just sort of changing the order in which it spat out those squares and triangles. And then once I had the quadrant, I was then fairly easily able to make just one full instance of the pattern. And then from there, it's pretty simple actually. It's just inverting colors where you need to, and then just making sure that you have the repetition going correctly. Just repetition, 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 repetition. And then, so I've just sort of consolidated everything here into one final product function. And here I have him, just when he starts off, he goes to the top left sort of corner of the area just to make it a bit easier. Because otherwise you end up all down here, and it's not as easy or good. And I just decided to go with black and white because it's easy, but it'd be extremely easy to modify this. Literally all you have to do is just change whatever colors you want them to be, and then they'll just invert, as you can see here. And let's see here. So, like I said, the types of functions that I used in this are those setup functions that I mentioned. So just making the window and making the turtle. And then basic shapes. So just a filled square, fill color, turtle T, side length SL. All these functions have triple quote doc strings, by the way. And then the only actual, I don't know, loops or anything of that sort of nature that I ended up having to use was just a for loop for the square, and then two more for the two kinds of triangles. And then everything after that, I just wanted to build it on top of this for sort of maximum simplicity, I suppose, would be sort of what I was going for. Because I didn't want to have to deal with, I don't know, all my variables getting mixed up or anything like that. And loops not being able to talk to loops, or I just wanted it to be simple, I guess is what I'm saying. And so all I used were three for loops, really, and then everything else is just turtle, very simple turtle management, just moving multiples of side length depending on how far they need to travel, picking up the pin and putting it back down, just basic turns and very simple things. Figured the easier I could make this on myself, the better off I would be. And so it took a little bit extra typing. I'm sure there's probably a more efficient way to going about doing this, but this seemed like the simplest answer to me, and I'm a decent typer, so it doesn't take all that long, I suppose. And then this is again the full pattern. Let's see how far he's gotten now, just so you can see that I'm not making anything up or anything like that, doing anything shady. And so, thank you. And all this stuff will be included in the email, but by the time you watch this, you'll already know that. So, thank you.